For the rest of announcements today, I don't have a lot. We're having another very important meeting prior to the catch-up day on Thursday. So we had the alumni panel last week, and this Thursday we are having a talk about the apprenticeship process and giving y'all a little more context about how that works moving forward. And other than that, we also are, well, I think Carrie has it on her slide. She'll go a little bit deeper into it, but that is pretty much all I have for y'all. Just a reminder, be there as close to 5:30 on Thursday as you can, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Colin. All right. Cool. Okay, so we are switching gears away from Spring for a couple of classes, just so we can focus on learning about relational databases and how to write SQL queries. So let's get into it. This is the first of 2 chapters in this alternate curriculum that you guys had links for. So we're just going to get into that, and there will be a studio for chapter 1, and then in the next class we'll do part 2, and there'll be a studio for that as well. Okay, so yeah, Colin just mentioned about these presentations. Be there on time on Thursday so you can hear important information about that. Grade assignment 3 deadline, of course, is coming up on the 23rd. That covers topics from chapters 8 to 16. The intro video that I created is now available. That playlist is in class announcements. And in case you missed the announcement that I put there last night, there is a call for art for classes 16 through 20. I will be including artwork from you guys and from students from my last cohort as well. So that we can actually use some real stuff and you know, get rid of all this old art from the masters that we've been using for examples. All right, so let's talk about storing data in a database. We'll talk about the concept of relational databases, talk about the MySQL Data Types specifically, and MySQL Workbench that you'll be using to maintain the database. And then how to write queries, lots of important keywords and syntax for you to learn. And then the concept of joins, where you actually take 2 different tables and combine data from each of them together. All right, so relational databases. This is all about data storage. You might have an application that's running, and maybe you have a form on that application. And up until now, you guys have been doing a little bit of that with your Spring applications, but you've had no way to save the data in a database. So we talk about this as being persistent, when you are able to have that data be available the next time the person comes back to the application. And we accomplish this with those CRUD operations we've talked about before, where you create, read, update, and delete. So these are essential operations for working with databases. We're going to look at what a table is, right? In a relational database, data gets stored this way so that you can have each column representing a specific property of some kind. And then the row represents each record that has all of its values for each of those properties. And you want to make sure that each record has an ID number. For now, we're gonna look into a couple ways to do that tonight, and then once we get back to working with Spring, we're gonna learn about a technology that's gonna actually like assign it, make sure the database assigns it for you, which will be pretty cool. And then for every column and row, there will be a value, but if there is no value, it's just automatically going to say that it's null. So here's kind of what this looks like. So that entire thing is the table, right? That's a single column, that's a single row, that's a record with related and for all the values for that particular record. There's an ID number, there's a value, so you get the gist of this, right? This is how we're going to be storing this data in a table, and we are going to have multiple tables. So let's talk about data types, because the names of the data types are a little bit different in MySQL than they are in others. So if you want to carry out these CRUD operations, you have to actually have a language, and it has specific syntax. And so we're going to use MySQL or MySQL, and that stands for Structured Query Language. And this particular one has its specific names, like int for integers, double for doubles, varchar for strings, and you have to make sure to provide that maximum length. It's important to actually, specify how long can this string be. And then Boolean, which also could be bool or tiny int. Those are just aliases. And what that does is store values of 0 or 1 for false or true, respectively. And then, you just list each column with its type in a diagram like the one you see on the right. We're going to be talking more about diagrams as we move forward in other classes, but this is kind of your first glimpse of what a table diagram looks like. And you'll notice that naming convention is snake case, lowercase with underscores separating each word. All right. So if you want to administer a MySQL database, you will go into MySQL Workbench and actually, create a schema, which is your database, and then add tables and things like that. So if you have not already done it, there's a section in the appendix in the curriculum, which is also linked in chapter 1, called Installing MySQL. Gives you all the directions for getting everything installed. So hopefully you've already done that, because you're going to need it for studio tonight. And once you have that up and running, and you've got the server running on your local machine, you can go in and create as many schemas as you need, and create as many tables as you need in those schemas. So those exercises in chapter 1 walk you through this process of creating a new schema, and it automatically generates a script that you can apply, and it just does it for you behind the scenes. And then boom, you've got yourself a database. And you can start creating tables and putting data in it. So you can kind of see here, the name of my server is CRJ001, which is, not exactly like amazingly innovative, but there it is. And then I, here have said, I want to add a schema. So I've gone to this little icon here that looks like a little, database symbol with a plus sign, and clicked on that, and then came in here and put in a name, and then just hit apply a couple of times, and then it runs this little thing that it creates for you. Create schema with that name, and boom, you've got it. Okay, so let's go over and see what that looks like. So here I am in MySQL Workbench. I've just opened it, and all I see is the server that I created that's running on my machine. And now I'm in the main interface here. You can see on the left, I've got quite a few schemas already. But let's say I want to create one for tonight. I'm going to come here and click on that button, and then say class 14 underscore examples. And come down here and say apply, and then apply again. And you see a little green check. It was successfully applied, and I can say close. I know some of this text is going to be hard for you guys to see. I have made the fonts bigger everywhere that I could, but some of these little, windows and things, it's just not possible. Okay, at least not that I could find. Okay, so now I have myself a schema right over here. You can see it, class 14 examples. All right. I want to make a note here about something that's important. I was about to demonstrate it, but then I remembered I have a slide for this. Okay. So if you have multiple schemas, you've got to make sure that your queries that you're going to write are being applied to the right database. And something that is very tricky is that you can highlight these. Like you can see that I used to have green, now I've got orange, but I can come over here and I can highlight these, right? That does not mean that that's the one that's been selected. You have to actually double click on it. And then once you double click on it, it'll be in bold. And that's how you know that that's the one it's going to try to run the scripts on. So I right now have movie buff in bold because the last thing I did was the studio review for you guys. So I need to come up here to class 14 examples and actually double click on this. And now you see that that one's in bold. And no matter where I go down here, if I just single click on these, it doesn't matter. This is the one that's bold. That means this is the one that our queries are going to be, applied to. So that's important. All right. So how to write a query? A couple of just preliminary things. You can add comments in a query. There are multiple ways to do this. You can do it with a hashtag, also known as an octothorpe. That's a fun word. You can use a double dash, and you can also use that / and asterisk combo that has like an opening and closing when you want to have multiple lines, just like you can in JavaScript and Java. That translates. However, if you use command / or control / on your PC, you're automatically going to get the double dash, but you can go into the settings and change it here and change it to the octothorpe, should you wish. And then just keep in mind that when you're using the double dash, you have to have a space after it, or it doesn't treat it like a comment. Okay. So you're going to see me I'm using the default. I'm just using the double dash in all of my stuff. Okay. So the other thing to know is that when you want to execute a query and you're going, what's a query? How do you write it? We're going to get there in just a second. This is a query over here, creating a table. There are a couple of icons here. One is like a lightning bolt. The other one is a lightning bolt that has a cursor in front of it. Here's the difference. If you want to run the entire script, every single query that's in the whole script, if you don't have anything highlighted, then you can hit that first button and it'll just run everything. If you want to run only one or more that are specific, but ignore all the rest of the ones in the script, you can highlight them and then hit that first button. If you want to highlight a single query, which you'll notice that it ends in a semicolon, that's how it knows when a query begins and ends. You can just place your cursor anywhere inside, and from this row to this row, 2 to 7 right there, and then just hit that one that has the cursor on the button, and it will just execute that one. And so I'm going to be doing a whole lot of that tonight. It's about the fastest way when you're doing like a query at a time and you don't want to execute them, multiple times. Okay, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of just, operating the thing, right? Let's get into the syntax. We're going to be creating a table first. We can't really put data into it until we have it. So the first thing we want to do is use create table as the keywords, the command there, and then just give it a name. And then inside these parentheses, we're going to list every single column name along with the data type. And then also make sure that the ID is marked as a primary key. That means that this is the unique piece of information that identifies this, each record. So even if you had things that have the same title or the same artist or whatever, you can have duplicate information in all of the other columns, but the artwork ID has to be unique for every single one, and that's how it tells the data apart. So that's a primary key. Separate each one with commas, and then just make sure that entire query ends with a semicolon. As I said before, that's how it knows when a query ends, and then it knows, to pick up with the next one. So the professional standard is to use all caps for all of your commands and keywords and your types. It is not required, but it's recommended. It just makes it much easier to read what the names of things are versus what are actually, keywords and such. Okay, and then of course you execute the query once you finished reading it, writing it. Haha. And then you'll also need to refresh the schemas panel. This trips people up because you go, I created the table. Where's the table? I don't see the table. You're going to see how this works in a second. We're going to refresh that panel and then we'll see it. Okay, so let's go over and do this. Let's actually create our first table. So I've got my class 14 examples highlighted here. It's bolded, so I know that this is the one that it's going to execute it on. And I'm going to, I actually have starter code for this, so give me a second. I'm going to open. I want to go to, I think I just stuck them on my desktop. Yep, I'm going to open these two. Oh, it'll only let me do one at a time. Fine, I'll do this one. Okay. So we're going to create the artwork table. I'm going to say create table, and I'm going to call it artwork. And then I have parentheses and a semicolon. And then inside here, I'm going to give my column names one at a time. The first one is artwork ID. It's an int, an integer, and I want to make sure this is the primary key. Then after that, it's just a matter of saying what the name of the column is and what its type is. And these are strings, so I'm going to do varchar. I'm going to say this one has a limit of 50. Some of this is a little bit arbitrary, but got to put something. And then, so I'll have title, artist, and style. So this is all information that you've seen us working with so far in our Spring application. So the content should be somewhat familiar to you. Okay, so that should create my table. So I'm going to put my cursor anywhere here. It doesn't matter where. I'm going to go to the lightning bolt button that has the cursor on it and press that. And we see down here at the bottom, this is very tiny. I'm sorry, I can't fix this, but you see a green check, right? A little tiny green dot probably on your screen. That means it succeeded. Woohoo! Okay. But you'll notice over here on the left where we see tables, there's no tables. Why don't we see our table? This little tiny refresh button or refresh icon right up here on the schemas panel, you need to click on that and then it updates and there's our table artwork. Okay. Also, if we want to just go see the contents of artwork anytime, we can just highlight this and go over and click on this little icon that looks like a table and click that and it opens a new tab. It automatically does a quick query. We're going to learn how to write these in a minute. That will actually just look for all of data and then it displays it down here below in the result grid. Now, right now we see all of our columns, artwork ID, title, artist, style, but we don't have any data, right? Because we haven't added anything yet. So it's an empty table, that's okay. But we have our first table. All right. Cool deal. We've just written our first query. All right, so there again, you've got a file that's kind of your script file. And unless you save it and give it a name, it's just going to say something like query 10. But I actually had this already saved in a file, so it has a name. And then there's that key that you're assigning to that ID, which is important. Okay, so let's say we want to add some information. We want to actually add rows to our tables. We can go ahead and say, I want to insert all of the values that are possible, all of the different columns. You just use insert into, and you say that what the table name is, and then use this syntax where you say value, parentheses, and then just give it, one after the other. It's very similar to the idea of calling a constructor, kind of looks like that, right? So value, and then you just give the values that correspond to all of the column names. And make sure you do them in the right order, and then it will add them in. Okay, and then of course, again, make sure the entire thing ends with a semicolon so it knows where it stops. And we want to select only the query that we wish to execute because we don't want to create the table again, right? So let's go over and do this. We will create a single new record and say insert into artwork. That's the name of the table. And then I'm going to say values and say 1. I want it to be record 1. This is my ID. The next one is title. So I'm going to say Mona Lisa. And then Leonardo da Vinci for the artist. And then Renaissance for the style. Okay. And then I'm ending with a semicolon right there. So again, if I don't have anything selected and if I have my cursor out here in the middle or something, if I was to hit this first one, it would try to create the table again and we'd have a problem. I'm going to just put my cursor in like on top of this one and just use the second one here. So it'll just run that one. Now, if we go over to the tab that has the arc table and you see this little blue refresh symbol on the result grid, you can just press on that and you'll see your new information show up. Let's get all these kind of lined out here so we can see everything real easily. Okay, Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci, Renaissance, and the artwork ID was 1. And you'll notice I didn't specify any specific columns up here. And that's because I was intending to provide data like values for every single one of the columns. If you're providing them for everything, including the ID, then you don't need to put anything here. You can just say insert into table and then just do it all. However, if you want to have partial values, you can specify which columns it is you actually want to add it for, and then it'll just ignore the other ones. So you use the same exact command, insert into, but you say what the columns are, and then give the values just for those columns, and then execute it. Okay, so let's do this. Insert into, and I'm going to say artwork for the table, and then I'm going to specify, I just want to provide the artwork ID, the title, and the artist, but not the style. And so then I can say the values for that are going to be 2, girl with a pearl earring for the title, and Johannes Vermeer for the artist. And then I'm, ignoring the style. But as long as they correspond, you have the, same columns, values for all the same columns you specified, it allows a partial update. So let's run this and go refresh down here on the results grid. And there we see it. And it just says null for style because I didn't provide anything. That's the default. All right. If you want to add 2 more records at the same time, we can do that as well. We could say we want to add 2 more artworks. We could say insert into artwork. In this case, I'm going to provide all the values, so I don't need to specify the columns. I'll just say the values are, and then say 3, the Starry Night, 5 Vincent. There you go. And that would be post-impressionism. And then I'll close the parentheses and then put a comma. And then I can just open new parentheses and continue on. The Kiss, the stuff. And Art Nouveau. Okay. And then my semicolon once I'm done. So you can do as many as you want all at once, just like this. So let's run this one. And we have success. Let's go over here and update the table. We should see 2 more, 3 and 4. And there they are. Okay. All right, so how do we add a new column? Let's say we have our table and we go, okay, we've got a title, we've got an artist, we've got a style. We want to keep track of which of these paintings are on display currently and which ones aren't. So that sounds like a job for a Boolean, right? So let's add a column. We can use alter table with the table name, and then give it both the column name and the data type that it's supposed to hold. And that'll create a new column. And then of course we execute it. Okay, so we'll come over here, add a column called on display. So alter table for artwork, and then add on underscore display. And it's meant to be a Boolean. So this is the column name. This is the data type it's supposed to hold. All right, let's execute that. And now if we come over here, we look and we say, okay, it's not here. Let's refresh it. And it's still not there. What's going on, right? Well, this is an instance where you're actually changing the structure of the table. So you have to run the entire query again. So if we come up here to this query, we can actually run that again. And now we see the new column on display. And of course, all the values are null because we haven't provided those yet for any of these records. But that's what it takes. Running this little refresh down here will only bring up new records. It does not show if you've added new columns. Okay, so that's it. So now we have some records that do not have values for this new column that we've created. Let's find out how to do that. We can use this update command, specify the table name, and then use the set keyword with key value pairs, column value for as many things as you want to update. And the important thing, this is absolutely critical, you have to set a condition so you can say which record it is you're trying to update. And you need to use, it needs to be a primary key, not just anything. Because if you used something like a title or an artist, those could be the same across multiple records, right? And generally speaking, you're trying to update a very specific record. You want to use a primary key. So unless you have safeties in place, and sometimes they do have like, kind of a thing where it'll stop you from doing it because it'll be like in a safe mode. But if that's not the case, you will update every single record with that information if you forget to use the where keyword. So let's show what this looks like. We're going to come over here and update the third record with ID number 3 to indicate that it is in fact on display. So I start with update, table name is artwork, and then I say set the column on display to, and I use equal sign to say set it to this value. And I want it to be 1 for true, because 0 is false, 1 is true. That's the way it works. And then I specify, I don't want that for everything. I want that specifically for the artwork ID of 3. All right, let's run it. Now, if we come over here and refresh our table, we see that the Starry Night is now noted that it's on display, 1 for true. All right. So let's update the second record so that we can assign the style and indicate that it's on display. We're going to update 2 things at once for the same record. Come back over here and say update artwork, set, and then in this case, I want on display to be equal to 1. And I also want style to be Baroque. All right, where artwork ID equals 2. All right, run this and go over and check our results. I'll refresh. And there we see it. Girl with a pearl earring now has the Baroque style and is also marked as being on display. Okay, now we are going to learn next how to actually read results. You've seen this select keyword up here. We're going to write different queries that use this keyword. But before we do, I want to actually insert a little bit more, a few more records so we have more data to work with. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. I am not going to type it out. So I'm going to use insert into again with artwork, just like we did up here for number 3 and number 4. And I'm going to add 5 through 9 with a bunch more art by different artists here. We got a couple more Van Gogh, we got Cezanne, another Vermeer, and another Da Vinci. All right, so I'm going to run this and come over and update, and there we go. And because I provided the values up front, we actually have on display values for all of these because I, added that in as I was doing it. Okay, cool. So let's talk about what happens when you just want to go look up information, as you do. You can use the select command, and if you want to see all of the columns, just use an asterisk. Otherwise, you can specify columns by just listing them out, comma separated. And then you use the from keyword to specify the table name. So select something from table. And then you just execute it, and the results show in the grid below, just like you were seeing over here. So you can see already they've when you come over here to your table and you click this little button, it just pops this up and it says select all columns from, and then it gives the name of the table. And in this case, it automatically also used the schema name as a reference. So let's go write some of these ourselves over here. So let's say we want to view view all records in the table. I apparently am missing a comment because this was intended to be here. And this is intended to be where we write this next query. Okay, so this should say add a few more records. Okay. All right, so let's view all the records in the table. So select all from artwork. It's as simple as that. And then I'll just do that one. And there we have it. And this looks just like it does over here, right? Because that's all we were doing. All right. What if we want to view only the artwork that's currently on display? I just saw what happened, guys. I did this early. It actually was meant to be down here. That's okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, let's view the artwork. We're gonna say select all again this time and say from artwork, but I'm gonna narrow it down and provide a filter using that where keyword. Where on display equals 1. Only where it's true. And let me get rid of this semicolon. There we go. All right, let's run it. Okay, so it narrows it down and shows us just the records of the artworks that are currently on display. So this is the basics of working with database records. All right, so we already added all of our stuff up here since I did it prematurely. Let's continue. So we want to view titles, artists, and styles of all post-impressionist artwork. So we're getting a little more specific here. We want specific columns to display, and we also want to narrow it down to only the records that are post-impressionist. So we'll start with select, and instead of saying all with an asterisk, I'm going to say title, artist, style from artwork. And then where style equals, and this is where I, specify only those that are post-impressionist. Okay, let's run it. And boom, we have 3 Vincent van Goghs and 1 Paul Cézanne. And yes, so we can run another query and actually have 2 conditions. So this time we want to run the same thing, except also indicate the ones that are not on display. So I'm going to use the and keyword, and I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Hold on. Yeah, guys, it would help if I actually did the slides. Okay, so again, if you're filtering things, you do the select, but then you also have the where to actually specify. And this is what we just did. And here we go. You can have multiple conditions if you use keywords like and. Just make sure you put things in parentheses. And then same thing, you can use or not. Those logical operators exist as well. Okay, so here I need to take my style equals post-impressionism, put that in parentheses, and then have another set here where I specify on display equals 0 for false. And then we'll run this. Okay, so now it narrows it down to 2. And something that's a good distinction to make here, you might be thinking, well, didn't you need to actually have on display as a column in order to filter on it? And the answer to that question is no, absolutely not. If the column is in the table, you can use it, you can reference it and make use of it. It doesn't have to be something you actually display. If we wanted to display it, we could. But in this case, we were only interested in the title, the artist, and the style. But we still wanted to use on display as criteria for filtering it down. So that's totally valid. All right, and then we can do another one. Let's use the or keyword this time. We'll view titles and artists if artwork is either by Da Vinci or Vermeer. So we'll say select title and artist from artwork, where artist equals Leonardo da Vinci, has to match the string exactly, or artist equals Johannes Vermeer. All right. All right, and now we have all 4 artworks by both artists. Okay, So that's the basics of filtering. You just use where, use those logical keywords, and you can produce very specific results and narrow down. And you can imagine if you had a database with thousands of records, this kind of thing is very important. Okay. Now, what if you want to order things? If you want to actually have them in ascending or descending order. You can use the select command to do, again, to do all the columns or some of the columns. Use that from keyword with the table name. That part's the same. And then you use the command order by and specify the column name. And this will let you say exactly what it is that you're wanting to order it on. But then you also can specify ascending or descending. I believe that it defaults to ascending if you don't. But it's always good to be explicit, generally speaking. So we'll view all the records. And by all the records, we mean all the records. So select star from artwork. And then we're going to say order by. And we'll just say that we're going to order by style ascending. And now we have all of the artworks that are in the database, but you'll notice the artwork IDs are not in order anymore because we've said instead we want to come over here and order by style. Art Nouveau, Baroque, Post-Impressionism, Renaissance. Now they're in that order. Let's try deleting something. So let's come over and talk about that. If you want to delete a record from a table, it can be done. You use delete from with the table name. And then you add a condition where the column is with the column and the value. And again, be real careful with this. Make sure you use the primary key. So it's typically going to be the ID number to do this so that you're specifying exactly which record it is that you want to delete. So let's delete the Church at Auvers and say delete from artwork. And then where artwork ID equals 6, because that is, yes, the artwork. That is the specific ID of Church at Auvers. Okay, run it. And we have success. If we come over here and look at our thing and I'll update it, you'll notice that it just disappeared, right? We go straight from 5 to 7, 6 no longer exists. We just deleted data from our database. You have to be careful with this. But obviously, you would, right? You'd be very careful. And when we are working with Spring and we have, like maybe a delete form on our website where we can go in and do that, it's going to, automate all of that for us. Okay, so let's say you want to drop a table. You made a mistake. You want to just completely adjust your script and start over. This is usually part of the development process. You can do it. So you would really use this option with extreme caution if you have production data. But when you're just working with development and you're figuring out what your, structure is going to be, your data schemas, you want to have this option. So you can do it first this way, where you go over to the table name on the left in the schema panel and right click and choose drop table from the context menu. Or you can use the command drop table with the table name as part of your script. So I'm not going to do this right now because we're going to need this table in a minute for what we're doing. But I could drop it and then I could just rerun this entire script and have it recreate and add all the data and manipulate it the same way. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that that was a thing. Okay, who has questions about what we've done so far? Which was a lot, I realize. Mel?
Okay, this is a very silly question, but how do you change the colors of your display? I searched everywhere and couldn't figure out how, and the default looks like it's from 1998. And yours looks much better.
I have no idea. Are you on a Mac or on a PC?
I'm on a Mac.
Okay. Are you talking about the colors in here?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean the whole
Whole
display.
thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've had this installed since I was a student in 2019. So
Okay.
It sort of looks like you're just on dark mode.
I think it might just be dark mode. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Melanie.
In the exercises, it was having us like open different queries for like the insert and all that. Is that the standard or?
Oh, yeah, you're gonna do that for Studio tonight too, where they're gonna give you an insert script so that you can just throw a bunch of data into your table once you create it. 2 tables actually. And yeah, that would be one way to do it. If you have a bunch of data, you can generate those scripts so that you can then easily go and drop that information into a new table. That's one way to do it. You also will, and we'll do this next class, where you can actually like have things in a CSV file, comma separated values, and import data that way. There are different ways to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, any other questions? Nope, okay. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about joins. right, welcome back. Let's talk about joins. What if you have two tables and you want to actually have information from the two appear in the results together? In order to do this, we actually are going to need to set up a second table. And so we're going to do that in just a second. But let me talk about the concepts of this. As you can see, we have some Venn diagrams, which are very useful in a case like this. You can join things in essentially 4 different ways. One is the inner join, which you can see basically means the results will only include things that both have in common. And then the left outer join says take everything from the first table and display it whether or not things are in common with information from the second table, but then also display the things that are in common from the information coming from the right table. And then right is the opposite. It focuses on the second table and says, I definitely want all the results from the second table, whether there's stuff in the left table that corresponds to it or not, but then, give me the information that they share. If you want a full outer join, you basically do a combination of both and just say, I want all the results. I want everything, whether they have things in common or not. And so we have a way to do that. So we're going to learn the syntax for doing all 4 of these. Before we actually do that, let's go ahead and get the second one set up. So this is where I want to go, and I want to open another file from here. All right, we're going to create a new table called artist, and we're going to have an artist ID and name and nationality. And this time we're going to use that auto increment keyword that is really helpful when you don't want to have to assign the IDs manually. You want to let the database do it for you. So we're going to take a look at how to do this. So let's first say I want to create table named artist. And I want to have an artist ID that's an integer. It's the primary key. And I also want to say auto increment so that I don't have to create the IDs myself, and I can ensure that they will always be unique. Then I'm going to say there's a full name. That's going to be a string. So it's a varchar maximum length of 50. And then the third one is the nationality, which is also a varchar with a maximum length of 20. Okay, so we'll create this. I'm going to run this here. And then we'll come over here, and remember, it's not going to show up here in the tables unless I actually refresh the schema here, and then we see it show up. I can open a new tab here with that button, and we see artist ID, full name, and nationality. But of course, we don't have any data yet. So let's add some data. I'm going to add several records. I got to get to the right thing here. There we go. All right. For Van Gogh, Da Vinci, Vermeer, Dali, and Monet. So some artists that we have in the first table and some artists that we don't. So we're going to be able to kind of, see what happens when we have some things that are in one table and some things that aren't. So let's execute this one. Come over to our artist table and look, and I'll refresh down here, and there we go. We have our 5 that I inserted using the stuff we already learned. Okay, so here's the stuff that we have not learned. We want to do some joins to be able to see data from the artwork table, like a title and a style, but then also be able to see maybe the name and nationality of the artist coming from the other table. So let's talk about the inner join. With the inner join, you want to use the select command, any columns that you want to actually appear in the results. Then you say from, and you specify the first table, which is considered to be the left table. And then you're going to use the keywords inner join, and you give the second table name, the right table. And then you use the keyword on and say, these are the 2 column names from each table that should be compared against one another. So in this example that I have here, you can see that I've got, artwork.artist equals artist.fullname, because they actually have different names. But I'm using dot notation, you'll notice, to actually reference which one of the tables has which one. And that becomes really important when they actually have the same name. Like if I actually was doing this with artist IDs instead, and this is something that you're going to learn about how to do during Studio tonight. They're going to talk about this concept of a foreign key, where you can actually relate things based on the exact same thing. So, you'd have the ID of one and then the primary key in the other table, and you can relate them. If they have the exact same name, look, if I had an artist ID column, we would definitely have to make sure to use this type of notation to make sure that it's referencing the right table to compare the two. In this case, I have different names, so it's okay. The last thing to note here is that if you want to eliminate duplicate results, because the only information you're interested in might have, doesn't have all the details that make them unique, you can use this distinct keyword and it'll actually do that. So we're gonna look at how to do this, that as well. Let's do two different things. The first one, we'll just do an inner join on the artwork table, using the artist names, just so we can see what the two tables have in common. All right, so we're going to say select and then artist. Oops. Select artist. Okay. From artwork. And then that's the first table. That's my left table. Then I'm going to say inner join. And then the artist table is my second table on. And this is where I relate the two and say I want artwork.artist equals artist.fullname. And that's it. Let's run it. Okay, and we see Da Vinci, Vermeer, a couple of Van Goghs, another Vermeer, another Da Vinci, and it's like, okay, so those are the three artists we have in common. What if we don't want them multiple times? That's where we use this exact same query, but we can run it with that keyword distinct, and actually just put it right here after select distinct. I'm missing an N. There we go, and run that. And now we have only 3 results because it eliminated the duplicates. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't multiple artworks that with their own IDs, their own names, all of that exist. It's just the only result we were looking for was artist. And when we're just looking at the artist, we had duplicates. So that's how you actually manage to weed those out and make sure you only have one of everything. Okay, so now let's talk about the left inner join. We've done what, we've looked at what happens if you just want to know what they have in common. What if you want to be able to display all the stuff from the first table plus what they have in common? This is where you're going to select from the first table with any columns you want. And again, use dot notation if you need to clarify any names. But generally speaking, if the name only exists in one table and doesn't exist in the other, you don't have to do dot notation. Use the from keyword, specify the left table, then say left join with the right table name, and then again on, and then use the two things that they can be compared against. So let's do this one where we actually are going to go get the titles and artists, and then add nationalities from the artist table with a left inner join. So I want to say, and I'm going to go ahead and keep the distinct here and say title, artist, and nationality. And then I'll say from artwork. And this is what might be a little bit counterintuitive to you at first. Nationality doesn't exist in artwork, right? So just remember, you're naming the things here that are the columns you want to see in the results, regardless of which table they come from. And if you had 2 that had the same, you definitely would need to use dot notation. These all, like title and artist, only exist in artwork because in artwork, in the artist table, it's actually full name, right? It's the thing that corresponds. Nationality exists in artwork, but that's where the join comes in. So we'll say left join and then say artist for the second table, and then say on, and then I'm gonna, use the exact same criteria that I did before, because the artist name in artwork and the full name in the artist table are the things that we want to say, or what connect the two things together. This is how they relate. Okay, so let's run this. All right. So you'll notice that we see everything that relates. We have our titles and our artists and their nationalities, but we also have a couple of records here that don't have nationalities, because those artists, Klimt and Cezanne, are not in the artist table, right? This is what makes this a left join. It gave us the information. It included records from the first table, even if they don't have values in the second table. But it does not give us records from the second table that don't have connections, only the ones that do. So a right join is going to do the opposite for us. Right outer join is going to let us, it's basically the same exact setup syntax wise. You just use right join instead of left join. So let's do this. We're going to move this down a little bit. We're going to list all the titles and styles, and then add the full name and nationality from the second table. So we'll say select distinct and say title and style, and then full name and nationality. And again, those are all unique to their respective tables, so I don't need to use dot notation to differentiate. And then we'll say from artwork as the left table, and then say right join artist on, and then the same exact thing from before, the two things that they have in common, or the one thing that they have in common. All right, let's run it. Okay, so now we kind of see the opposite, right? We've got title and style for as many things as they have in common, but then we also have a couple where we don't have that information, because with a right join, we're getting records from the second table that have some artists that don't have artwork in the first table. So sometimes this can be useful to look things up this way. And so that's how you do it. Inner join, left join, and right join. So the last one to do is to talk about how do you do a full outer join to just see everything, whether they have things in common or not. You can see things from both sides. Okay. Here we go. So in MySQL, there is no specific syntax called full join or full outer join like there is in other versions of SQL. So you actually are going to use this keyword called union and do two different joins and then join them together with union. So we'll use a left join and a right join and then union, and basically, just put it all together. It really helps readability when you're doing this to put each of the two joins just all in one single line, as long as it's not too incredibly long and complex. So you can kind of see how I've done that. So I can keep the whole thing to 3 lines instead of having, all of this and then union and then all of this. Okay, so we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to list all records and then all columns of all records. So I'm just going to say select distinct from artwork. I don't really need to say distinct actually, because we want everything. And they're all going to be unique. So artwork, and then we'll say left join artist on artwork.artist equals artist.full name. Then I say union, and then I do the exact same thing I've done here in the same order, except I say right join. So go get everything from the left, go get everything from the right, but then, let's make sure, oh, I see what I did. Let's get rid of that semicolon. And then make sure that, we're still correlating them so that it knows what information from the right to put on the same lines as the stuff on the left. That's important, but we're gonna get it all, okay. All right, so here we have it. Artwork ID, title, artist, and style. And on display, those 5 columns there are all coming from the left table, the artwork table. And then everything on the right side is coming from the artist table. And you'll notice, you see the null values on the right and the null values on the left that indicate where you have some things where they don't have anything in common. But because we're doing the union of both, we're going to see everything regardless. Who has questions about joins? That went really fast. Anybody have any questions? It can be hard to wrap your head around this. And you guys are going to be doing some of this tonight, and you're actually going to be getting creative with it. I'm going to tell you right now, my slides are already available. So when you guys go to do Studio, you're going to probably, if you want to reference some of what I've done here, you'll be able to do that because you can get the link to the code. I've got it on GitHub. Okay, so there are no questions. We will wrap up and you guys can head to Studio early. So tonight, I think I have my slides out of order. That's okay. Let's go. Yeah, I do. Okay, Melanie, you have a question?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I wanted to wait and see if anybody had any questions about the lesson. Can I ask a question about the artwork? Submitting the artwork?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Are there like any restrictions on like, I don't know, political stuff, nudity, things like that?
I almost said this when I put the comments in. Here's where I stand. I fully believe 100% artwork should be open to be fully expressive of a person's beliefs and all those things. However, this is an educational institution, and we keep it classy and keep it not polarizing.
That's what I figured.
Yep. So just use your judgment, and
Okay.
I reserve judgment to not use it. So I mean, if it's in question, you can submit it, but use your best judgment. Because it's not the focus of what we're doing here.
Right.
We're going to focus on the code. So
Okay.
That would be my answer.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's talk about what's coming up. You have a catch-up class on Thursday. This is the one where you're going to have that big presentation from everybody about the job market. So make sure you're on time. Coming up next week on Monday, we're going to do the second SQL class. We're going to learn some more things about that. And then we're going to get back into our spring projects with classes 16 and 17, where we talk about object relational mapping. And this is where you learn how to make a Spring app communicate with a database so that you can manage all the relationships between all the data in your different models and things. Justin, you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, so Thursday's class, will that be recorded?
I believe so.
Okay, cool. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's what's coming down the pike. And it's going to be good. We're going to start really putting all this stuff together, and you're going to be able to build some pretty cool stuff. All right, so Studio, and then it looks like my things are out of order, so let's go back here. So tonight's Studio, you're going to create a schema called Movie Buff, and then you're going to create 2 tables, movies and directors, and relate those tables. And I mentioned the concept of a foreign key. They're going to walk you through how to do that, so no worries there. They're going to give you a prepared script to run to populate your tables with directors and movies. And then you're going to practice writing a bunch of queries. There's like, I don't know, 13 of them or something. And then there's some bonus missions, and some of them are easy and some of them are a little more involved, but you're going to be learning some new things. And here's what I would like to encourage you in. There are going to be things that are not covered in the chapter. There's going to be things that are not covered in my lecture even. Be resourceful. This is an important skill to learn, the wonderful art of Googling. So if you have something and you're just like, I don't even know what the syntax is for that is, or how to set it up, Google it. You're going to learn things, and work together on this stuff. This is a great one for pair programming. So you guys can, work together and figure things out. But you've got plenty of time since we're finishing a little bit early, and you can really dig into this and get comfortable with it. And then when we come back in a week for part 2 of learning SQL, you can build on this foundation to do even more. All right, I am going to, with that, stop sharing, and you guys head off to studio and have a great evening.